Welcome to Conversations with Laurel, everyone. I am your host, Laurel McHargue, and I have a very exciting guest today. His name is Nicholas Keating Casbarro, and we're going to talk about Vitalarium, book one of what is going to be an epic sci-fi series, right?
Absolutely. Book one of seven.
Book one of seven. I know. I thought it was going to be book one of six because I listened to a previous interview and you said six, and then all of a sudden it was seven. So we're going to talk about that. You already have awards. You're the winner of the Florida Authors and Publishers Association Gold Award, and you've got the Literary Titan Award. I mean, this is one heck of a book, and I finished reading it recently. And if I had to ask you everything that I've underlined in here or noted, we would be here all day. So we're not going to do that. Um,
It's
but
it's definitely not a shorty. That's for
it's
sure.
not. It's not. But boy, I tell you, it's easy to get into and stay into. So we'll just start with that. In the year 2351, the Vitalarium spatial fracture is identified. Would you please describe the Vitalarium fracture to our listeners?
Absolutely. So the spatial fracture is supposed to be a spatial anomaly that was not really anticipated by any of the physicists on Earth or any of the colonized planets before that. Um, Something that they basically just hadn't planned for, never really fit into their calculations, and yet here it is. Um, Out of which the fracture every so often expels basically small bursts of these Vitalarium meteorites, which humanity has become. Uh, well, it's just let's just say it's one of the most sought after elements in existence. So Vitalarium, when it's discovered, um, humanity basically realizes that they can utilize this to achieve faster than light travel. And I base this around a couple of different things. So, if you go down the UFO rabbit hole, you'll come across something called Element 151, which, believe it or not, is something that physicists and scientists in recent history have actually stabilized for about a half a second at a time in Large Hadron Colliders and things like that. It's not something that is easily attainable. We'll just say
Okay.
that.
Okay.
So Vitalarium was my answer to basically a stable version of this, but I also based it on, or I got the idea from it from a physics concept that was proposed by physicist Miguel Alcubierre in, I believe it was 94. It was in the 90s. He put out a paper that basically described a workaround for the universal speed limit, which is the speed of light. And he basically postulated that if you can condense space in front of you and elongate it behind you, then you can far surpass the speed of light, and we can start reaching planets at a much more reasonable rate. Um, and having been a sci-fi fan my whole life, I'm sure part of me writing this book stemmed from my own, you know, want to go and explore the cosmos myself. I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime, but I certainly tried to write my way into that type of future.
Yes. So when I read your description of it and one particular scene, first of all, let me just say your descriptions are fabulous. Your world building is incredible. The description of it ejecting it almost felt like giving birth. It almost read like this thing was giving birth to these things. It was crazy. So, and again, your fight scene on page 96, your descriptions are so vivid. Your fight scene, my heart was pounding. I'm like right there. I'm right in it. You're creating comics with this book already. You've got some comic books out. I can only imagine that as you're writing this, you're envisioning this on a big screen.
100%. I have always my entire life been a daydreamer. Um, you know, doodling when when I should have been paying attention in class. Um, just kind of dreaming up these fantastical worlds. And that's kind of just the way I guess my mind works. When I'm writing, I'm actually describing the scene that is going on in my head. So like I see it happening like a movie. Um, and I try and put the reader directly, behind my eyes to be able to see what's going on, to see it the way that I see it. And what's really cool is now that the comic books are out, some of my, in mind you, it's, it could be biased, but a lot of it's like close friends and family members who have read the book. I gave them each a comic and I said, comic came out. Tell me what you think. And they all unanimously came back and said, that's exactly what I was imagining when I was reading the book, which is awesome because, my relationship with the illustrator and the colorist of the comic books has gotten to a point where it's like they're literally pulling it out of my head.
Yes, yes. Well, I don't have the comic yet, and I'm gonna say yet, but I know that we can get them on your website, and we'll get to that. So yeah, you mentioned in a previous interview that this is like a grungy steam a cyberpunk future. Um, s- is that still how you see it? And you talk about it being dark. This is not a lighthearted read, people.
Yeah, I usually say it's not a cozy fireside romance. This is this is an edge of your seat type read, and I'm glad you said at certain parts like you could feel it, because that means it's felt real. It reads as real, and that's what I wanted to give people. I really wanted to give people an experience that they could immerse themselves in, and just some content that they could really sink their teeth into. So. Yeah, I 100% have some pretty ambitious goals of what I plan to turn this series into down the line.
Yes, and I loved in a previous interview you talked about your dreams and your sleep paralysis, which again I found fascinating. And you have terrifying dreams, which you remember. I want you to talk a little bit about that. But I have this recurrent dream. I don't know why, and I dream very vividly. Most of my work comes from dreams that I have as well, characters and scenes and all. But I woke up this morning from this recurrent dream where I'm on the top of this cliff and I have to jump. And I'm trying to find the closest place to where I'm going to land, and I just it's just anxiety producing. But talk about your sleep paralysis and the dreams that you have that may have inspired some
Yeah,
of your scenes.
I might need a sip for this one.
Yeah.
So, um, it's an interesting phenomenon. Um, Not just because I experience it, but because a lot of people experience it, and they all seem to say very similar things about what their experience is like. So when it happens, it's usually at the end of a vivid dream where I kind of realize I'm dreaming and I wake up, but my eyes open and I'm not quite awake yet. Um, I can't move anything except my eyes. I can look around the room. My head is pasted to the pillow. My limbs are numb. I can't do anything. Uh, and there's this strange, like, it's just this strange feeling of like omnipresent terror.
Mm.
And I can literally feel it like traveling down my spine, even though I know, like, it's happened to me so many times now at this point. I know what it is when it's happening. It never takes away that feeling. That seems to be like an uncontrollable aspect of it almost. But almost every single time, once my eyes start kind of searching the room, there is a figure, like it looks like a shadow, but it's not on the wall. Um, it's just a black silhouetted figure, either standing at the foot of the bed, or sometimes it's, up at the top corner of the room, just kind of like stuck to the ceiling. Um, And then all I can do is force myself to shut my eyes. But then one of the things that happens when I get my eyes shut is for a moment or so, I hear it's like tongues just right in my ear, almost as if they're being whispered from a distance of right here, like right next to my ear. And, that'll only last about a second or two, and then I pop out of bed like a vampire. I,
Yikes.
I, yeah,
Horrifying.
it is. And, but, I've definitely been able to use it almost as like a superpower. And I'm sure you caught a little bit of that inspiration throughout your read of the book.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Have you had these since you were a child? When did they start?
no, it probably didn't start until I was in at the end of my college career. That's when it really started. Now, there are certain vivid dreams that all definitely had a sci-fi theme to them. Um, and some of them recurring, some of them just some of the most vivid dreams I've ever had. And those also work their way in certain aspects. I actually just wrote, or it would have been a couple of chapters ago now in book two, I wrote about one of those very strange, vivid dreams that I had. I only had it once. It was very specific, and I actually worked that into book two.
All
So
right.
I have plenty of dream content that has certainly inspired elements of the story that connect with a much, much larger, I guess, the much larger story arc.
All right. No, I get that for sure. You begin and end Vitalarium with shall we say words from, let's just call it another,
Yes.
whatever the other is. And in the beginning, you talk about boredom, the boredom that comes with, momentary prosperity, weakness and laziness, all those kinds of things. How old are you?
I am 35.
You're only 35. How do you know all this? How do you know about this weakness and the laziness that results from momentary prosperity?
I've I'm a fan of history, and
Okay.
I have lived a relatively interesting life for my few amount of years on this earth. But I've seen a lot, and I like to ask questions. There's a curiosity in me that for a long time was kind of uh, just put on the back burner.
Okay.
And
Because of
this
school?
whole
Because of school?
because of school, yeah, I went to school to be a physical therapist in Northeastern, and it took me about 5 years of uh, going back and forth between going to class and oftentimes not going to class, and athletics. I was a pole vaulter in college as well. A lot of partying, and ultimately realized in year five that I didn't want to be a physical therapist.
Mm.
So much to the chagrin of my parents.
Yeah.
But I ended up finding a way to utilize those sciences by kind of going into more of a dynamic route, which was medical sales. Um, that's where I kind of started my career. And for a while, I was so focused on a number of different things that I had put any sort of creative outlet, I had forgotten about it. And
Oh,
which is
oh.
interesting because, as a kid, I was very creative. I used to actually draw my own comic books, and like I said, I'd be doodling in class, and they weren't just doodles. At one point, I had gotten quite good at illustrating, although that is a perishable skill, I assure you. I got an illustrator for the comic books for a reason. I would not have
Mhm.
been doing my story justice. So for a long time, I guess I had just kind of shelved any sort of creative venture. So when I actually got about to writing this book, it just poured out of me the first time I, sat down at the keyboard. Um, the first the first time I actually wrote, um, it was on a plane. Actually, the whole book was written at 36,000 feet.
Mhm.
I was on a plane a lot for my last job, but I had this particularly long flight. It was from Miami to Hawaii, and I was sitting
Mhm.
at the airport downloading episodes of a show that I didn't want to watch.
Yeah.
So I uh, I just realized how like this is a huge waste of time. Like I need to find something semi-constructive to be doing.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll drive myself crazy if I'm just trying to do work emails
Yeah.
the whole ride over there. So I had had a few ideas, some of them stemming from, back in my earlier years, some of them having to do with current events and some things that had, come to light. I had COVID had definitely kind of reignited my passion for learning and exploring. And it was just a time thing. I had a lot of time to do it. And yeah, so and that was certainly an interesting era. So there was a lot of current event material to be able to pull from.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure that can be,
Oh yeah. Well, yeah.
that, yeah, that can be seen. And
Absolutely.
so a mixture of all of these things, along with, the dream inspiration that I have, I said, all right, well, let's see where this goes. So I started writing and I got off the plane and I was finishing up chapter 4.
Yeah.
And I said, oh
Nice.
my God, like I
You got
I
something
am
here. Your
loving
muses.
this.
Yeah, your muses are screaming and you gotta go with it. It's amazing. And again, I talk about how young you are, but this is so rich and full of so many things. So Roman, your main character, Roman, and again, you have an omniscient uh, POV in this. So we're in lots of different people sense at different times, which and you do it beautifully, and that's a tough POV to use. But Roman's the main character. He's ultimately, I think, the superhero or going to be. His early tragedy ends him up in this boys' home, right? The Ion Street Home for Boys, and where he becomes a leader of sorts, through uh, trials and tribulations. So we really understand his motivation, and I understand that you base a lot of your characters on people that you know. I would love to meet your kick-ass love interest, Roman's kick-ass love interest. I'd love to meet her. Um, how do you show up in characters in Vitalarium
Well,
as a
if
character?
if you write what you know, then there's probably a little bit of the author in every character in some form or fashion, right? Whether even if it's just through certain desires or certain events that you put them through. But I personally do not have a character in this book.
Okay, all right. Toward the end, Emmanuel shows up.
Yes.
And he tells Roman that what he does is never about the money. It's a true calling to help those who need it, right?
Hmm.
Is that not you with your work with wound healing and burn victims? Is that not you a little bit?
I mean, like I said, there's definitely a little bit of me in everyone. There has to be, no one can perfectly remove themselves from their own biases. I don't believe you can get close, but I actually based a manual on a friend I made, a surgeon friend that I made when I was at a conference in Guadalajara, Mexico,
Okay.
and it was called the ISBI, the International Society of Burn Injury.
Okay.
And I met this surgeon, and he was from Nigeria, and he was like an absolute stud in terms of his training, his background. He is a plastics pediatric burn surgeon. Those are
Wow.
like that is a trifecta unlike any other. That's so. But what stuck out to me most about this guy was, I saw some of his presentations, and they see horrific things
Yeah.
out there where they don't have the same type of resources to be able to treat some of these grievous injuries that we have, say, in the States or in even in Europe or in other parts of the world. And he was just he had such a positive disposition on life. He was just he was a personality and incredibly down to earth. I've worked with a lot of surgeons and a lot of doctors, and some of them are there. When you're that smart, you're oftentimes people tend to err on the side of strange, or maybe not super, not very social, or not all the time. But he was just the life of the party, great guy, and had all of these very interesting outlooks on life. And I was pretty deep into the writing process at this point, and I just thought, oh man, I have to make a character after this guy. And so I crafted a manual after this surgeon.
Mm.
Um, and he actually allowed me to use his real name. It's his first name and his middle name.
Oh,
Is because I actually reached out to him first. I said, "Hey, listen, I'm crafting this character around you.
oh,
Because we kept in touch afterward." And I said, "Do you mind if I use your name? Like you can say no. I can create a pseudonym for you. But he said, "Oh no, absolutely. Use my middle name. More people know me by that." I was like, "Okay, okay." He's just an awesome guy. So actually, I think it was the first um, printed copy that I received that ever went out to anyone went to him. So I sent him a copy of that. And there are many examples like that in the book. Some of them close friends, some of them just people that kind of inspired me that I've met along the way. Some of them people that I've just modeled characters after from people being in the news.
yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
it,
Get your
it
inspiration from everywhere.
yes,
Yeah,
exactly. That
yeah.
I'm a big believer in that. I
I,
think I definitely think you can pull inspiration from just about anything, even if it's just a strange incident that you witness in a coffee shop. I mean, anything can give you inspiration.
yes.
And I'm not in hot take. I'm not a big believer in writer's block either.
Oh,
Um,
it's no, me neither. You can always write something, even if it's not what you want to write at the time. Like even if you're planning to write a scene and you're not, you can still write something, right? You can
oh
write about your
yeah.
finger.
So what I've found for me is, I know you mentioned the world building before, and that is something that I probably enjoy the most.
Obvious.
That's
It's
like
clear. It's clear. Yeah.
pure creation, and I I did a lot of it, and I did a lot of it even really prior to writing the subsequent chapters that came after chapter four. I've got a monstrosity of a storyboard that I document everything in, from all the planets to what are the characters, what's their motivation, what theme do they represent in the story itself.
Mhm.
I write a backstory for every character, no matter how small. If they have a speaking role at all in the book, they have a backstory, because I feel like knowing where they came from helps me to write their voice more accurately.
Mhm.
And it gives each of the characters a distinct feel, I think, that is easily recognizable in the writing.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely. You've done your homework for sure.
so yeah, oh yeah, I certainly have. But whenever I find that the writing is coming a little slower, I've realized that it's because I haven't defined that area of the world well enough. And so what I do is I just go back to the storyboard and I just start saying, okay, well, what does this look like? And I just start asking questions, and I
Yeah.
start, before long, there's another, three tabs on my Excel document detailing all of this. And then suddenly I'm seeing the scene again. in my
Yeah.
head.
Yeah.
It's not just, trying to force it frame by frame. It comes more easily because I can see the world around me. I can see all the things that the characters have at their disposal,
Yeah.
what obstacles they have. That has served me well in terms of staving off any type of
Yeah.
slow in the writing.
No, it's magical when that happens. Talk about your quantum communication network that you establish in here, the
Oh
fabric.
yeah.
I
So the
love
fabric
that.
that's
So
the
cool.
fab that thank you. The fabric is basically what ends up replacing the internet. And the fabric allows for instantaneous communication, even at great distances, like between planets or between a spacefaring vessel that is light years away from the planet that it's communicating with. It was basically my resolution for how is an advanced civilization run when you have multiple planets across a galaxy that all need to communicate because communication is a massive it's just a massive part of maintaining society.
Yeah.
They need to be able to
Mhm.
communicate.
Yeah.
So when communication breaks down, that's when things typically go awry in society. And yeah, so so I based the fabric on quantum entanglement. And so I, throughout this book, I started, doing deep dives into physics. I was reading physics papers. I was watching professors giving lectures on YouTube and everything else. And the quantum entanglement thing stuck out to me because I was like, well, the concept is that if you quantum entangle two photons and they're quantum coupled, you can take them and spread them out, and no matter how far you send out one of the other proton or what particles, it will still move dependently of the original particle that it's
Yeah.
coupled with. So you could move this one and the other one moves simultaneously. And so that became like the framework behind how communication is transferred at such great distances instantaneously. Um, and so there are, just like today, how, you can send emails, you can send a text message, you can make a phone call, you can FaceTime
Be in
someone,
a
you can
Zoom.
Zoom someone, just like we are now.
Yeah.
Um, I there are obviously different ways that we can communicate on the same platform. And so I created a number of, I guess, familiar ways to communicate, but with some modifications on the new platform. Um, One of which is just what they call a comm screen, which can project a holographic image. It would be, something someone carries that's like your kind of everyday cell phone. Another would be a tab device, something that they actually wear on their wrist that is able to project holographic images and connect to the fabric. The other would be there are, I talk about at times, folks have actually lenses in where they can access and speak to people on the fabric. And then I have entire rooms that people can immerse themselves in that
Yeah.
actually
Those are cool.
put them in almost like a VR
Yeah.
setting where they are standing across from and can even interact on a physical level with someone else who is nowhere near them. Um, and that, the fabric conversation also brings about the conversation of the fray, which was my version of kind of the dark web, the untraceable portion of the future's internet. And I don't describe it in book one, but in book two, I'm not giving away too much here, so I can tell you. So the incipience of the fray actually stemmed from a uh, a little bit of mischief on the account of a few intelligent, well-connected yet rowdy university students
Okay.
who decided that using their connections, they were going to quantum entangle thousands of particles with one of the main communication nodes because one of their, we'll say, family members maybe had a high up position at one of those communication companies.
Okay.
And then what they did with those is they launched all of these nodes in all different directions in space and they connected devices to them. And so what you have is no one can figure out where that second node is to be able to track where the communication is going to. They're still accessing the main platform of the fabric, but to be able to track that communication is impossible because no one knows where all of these other particle nodes are. And so what ended up happening was that obviously the college students got in trouble big time, on a federal level. We'll call it federal, but but they never did anything about the fray because what ended up happening was shortly after the war broke out, and then the government started using the fray to be able to communicate without letting any of their enemies know. And so the fray just kind of became a mainstay, an accidental mainstay in communication in the future.
Are any AI companies trying to recruit you right now?
I don't have the background for that. No, definitely not.
Well, well,
Uh,
yeah,
I mean, hey, I'm always open to new opportunities. You know, I haven't reached a point yet where I've quite quit my day job, but things
well,
are growing fast, and that has been a really fun ride to be on.
well, I
So
was
right
going to
now
say
I'm
you might have
still,
to, yeah.
yeah, I'm still, well, I get, I don't sleep much nowadays. I have too much to do. So between the startup that I work for a new medical device startup. Between the book business and building out, writing book two, building the
Of
brand.
seven, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
You're doing a lot, and so one of my questions was about how you incorporate stuff that's happening today. Like I know people say a lot of comedians don't really have to do a lot of work because just look at what's happening in the world. I mean, the material is out there. I mean, you have so many parallels to today's government, I might say. You have ARPA discussing a series of laws being utter nonsense and asking if anyone has read the 2,000-page monstrosity. I mean, in the news now, you hear about these bills that no one's reading because they're ridiculous. Keeping the populace docile, right? And keep people stupid so you can control them. Um, Creating an era where loyalty will be the most sacred of virtues. The CP guardsmen inciting violence. I mean, this is I got chills reading some of this stuff because it's happening now. So I'm imagining that you watch the news and take notes of it and I mean it's in there.
I like to read my news, and I like to go to multiple different sources. I'm probably
Good.
one of the
Yeah.
few people who says, all right, well, that's that side of the story. Let me go and read the other side of the story. And if truth is somewhere in the
Thank you.
middle,
Thank you. Yeah.
then I'm that is what I'm in search of. I
You're
know,
unusual. You're unique in that case. I would say. I think there's so many people out there, and that's why we're having so many problems because people will only watch their news, right? How can you be
yeah,
informed?
well, you're either what is it? You're either misinformed, you're uninformed, or you know, you tune out.
Yeah.
And none of those seem like a good option. And so I it's funny. I've been on a lot of podcasts, and not bragging. I've been on a lot, and certain people will say like, "Oh, is this reminiscent of this, or is this reminiscent of that?" And usually, it always has some kind of the slant becomes overtly clear. And that was not my goal in writing this book. My goal in writing this book was to explore the human condition and to try and explore what humanity looks like in an advanced civilization that spans multiple planets.
Mm.
Um, and focus on the human aspects that still remain and the flaws that we retain and what that equates to in terms of policies at times. And it's not meant to be partisan in any way. And so I always say to those people, I'll say like, look, if you saw something that you see as mirroring real life, then good. That's what art is supposed to do, right?
Mhm.
But I challenge any reader to kind of observe your or be cognizant of your own biases. Everyone's looking at every story nowadays through their own set of political lenses.
Absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
challenge everyone to, because it's funny, two people will read the same thing and pull two completely different viewpoints from it,
Yeah.
from the same text. And
Right.
it just shows, kind of how polarized our society, and this is not just in our country. This is like a global phenomenon that's
Mhm.
occurring.
Mhm.
It shows how polarized we've become. And when you reach a point where you get so polarized that you begin viewing, your neighbors, your even your friends at times as almost, through the eyes of someone who, if you begin viewing them as almost your opponent rather than people who want the same outcome, they're just coming at it from a different view.
Mhm.
It's kind of a dangerous, it's kind of a recipe for disaster, actually.
Yeah.
And in the book, um, I don't dive into it heavily in the text of the book. In the world building aspect of it that equated into the book, I do talk about it where, when the Aghanon family takes over, and Xeris Aghanon is the overseer, kind of the basically holding the highest office in the Coalition for Prosperity, the CP. They are credited with basically crafting a society that is really focused on subjugating the populace, and they got a lot of credit for it because even the coalition is a puppet government for the IGB, who really controls the Vitalarium trade. Um, but one of the things that happened was the polarization became so much so that the everyone on the planet really couldn't agree, and so the only logical answer was for one side to ultimately win.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, it happens so with violence.
Mhm.
And that's how you end up with a one-sided view of everything. You've got a state-run media on the planet that just pumps out the same story. And if you are not adhering to that particular side of the story, then you are a dissenter and you are the enemy,
Yeah.
and you are oftentimes locked up for it.
Yeah.
And that is that is certainly not a society I would like to live in. And
No, no.
that certainly reflects a lot of my dystopian inspirations from the past. Your George Orwell,
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
Aldous Huxley,
Hmm.
a lot of Frank Herbert. I know you mentioned the omniscient perspective. Frank Herbert wrote in the omniscient perspective, and that was one of the first real hard sci-fi books that I ever read. So my father gave me a copy of it, and I read that when I was probably like 13. Um, and so I liked the omniscient perspective. I find personally there are a lot of strengths and benefits to it. With any perspective you take, there are,
Hmm. Pros and cons. Yeah.
shortcomings
Yeah.
and pros and cons. And
Yeah.
but I like it, and I wanted to find a way to ascribe a meaning to it, which I think you begin to find out about at the end of the book.
Yeah. 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 So Romans, His I would say superpower origin story, if we could talk about that a little bit, is due to his own carelessness, right?
100%. He
So I was
is.
when that happened, I'm like, I was trying to think, are there other superheroes who, due to their own, you know, negligence, got their superpowers? I
So
mean,
I
that's kind of a unique take on how he, got his DNA
so
changed. I had to
that's
laugh at that. I mean, that was pretty great.
it's fine. There are definitely moments of comedy in the book. There's some comic relief in there. But yeah, I wanted to show for him, he's a character with he's definitely a morally gray character.
Yeah.
Maybe even more so than morally gray. He could be considered a bad character by many at the very beginning. Um, Certainly not someone you want to mess around with. He's kind of a lost soul.
Yeah.
Um, he's basically a drunk, who's doing odd jobs for local gangs when you first meet him as an adult. But he's kind of drowning out the trauma of his past in just whiskey and women.
Yeah.
And the world that he has kind of fallen into has really, really hardened him, but it's also created an incredibly tough character. He's got not only a penchant for violence, but a pretty serious talent for it. Um, he's definitely still smart, and that becomes clear in certain parts of the book. He's talented in general,
Mhm.
but he's kind of lost discipline and lost his kind of purpose in life. And so a lot of this story is or this book, I should say, it's the rediscovery of his purpose. This is the foundation upon which, the rest of his character growth will kind of build upon. This it's over the course of the next six books.
And he becomes, I guess we'll call him a reluctant hero, right? I mean, so I want you to talk about the Jarek character and, basically his dead friend. And I'm wondering how much of your sleep paralysis vision uh, inspired this Jarek character coming to him. And, he tells me he has to pass some ultimate, trial or whatever. And, he's like, why me? Talk about using a dead man's presence as, uh, I don't know, a guide for Roman.
I think it's a powerful motive first and foremost. Second, I think it just goes to show who Jarek was to Roman, because you don't see much of Jarek while he's alive.
Right.
The majority of your experience as a reader with Jarek is through Roman's visions, both
Yeah.
both waking and asleep.
Yeah.
And so I think like everyone on this planet, we're all kind of searching for answers. And as far as sleep paralysis goes, and whatever that is, it certainly seems to be um, a transferable experience across, you know, everyone who experiences it. Yet no one really quite knows what it is, and we don't really have any way to measure it. Well, I can't, if I can't research it and I can't figure it out, then I am going to seek to ascribe an answer to it. And so that was my way of doing so. Um, and so Jarek appears to Roman first in a very strange, vivid dream that he has. Um, and at first, he doesn't even realize kind of what's going on. He's just like, "Oh, hey, Jarek, what's up?" And they talk like they used to, and then suddenly the real Jarek appears, and Jarek's been dead for many years, and so you see this kind of gaunt corpse standing in front of him, telling him that his life is about to change significantly. Um, and he almost refuses to elaborate as to what it is, but he keeps
Mhm.
trying to guide him in the right direction. Um, and so that was he's kind of the muse to Roman
Mhm.
in a lot of ways, and it's
Yeah.
someone who we know based on his past, Roman would have listened to
Mhm.
because of his relationship with Jarek. It's literally the only best friend that he can really account for in his entire life.
Yeah.
And losing him obviously was extremely traumatic, but the presence of him, dead or not, is certainly going to motivate Roman to act.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so that's why I chose to do it that way.
Yeah.
Um, Jarek is Jarek is part of probably the longest running story arc in the entire book. I have the broad strokes of the entire series story arc. Certain major events I think are hardwired into it, but how we get there is I try and leave that relatively fluid.
Okay.
Um, but you won't really find out until the end.
All right. All right. I mean, like I said, I think using that really really helped. I mean, it's a way of Roman dealing with his angst and his questions and all that, kind of like having something to bounce ideas off of and to tell him. And, is it really all just him? I mean, the whole scene where it was kind of almost like a Fight Club scene where he's like, if I want to get you, if I want you gone, I need to do something. And I won't, no spoiler, but uh, I think it was a great way to have that in there. That was fascinating. Ah,
Let me ask you this. Who
yeah.
who do you think Jarek is?
At first you really feel like it's a spirit, right? Um, an outer body, another like him. But then, you question, and Roman himself questions, if you were really you, then, you wouldn't say these words. You would say something like he used some vocabulary that Jarek wouldn't have used. So Roman's like, you're in my head. This is me talking to me, putting it on someone else. It's, I think he's going to evolve. I mean, I've only read book one, so I mean, I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go with him, but he's a character that you put in there that I found fascinating, the way you used him. That's not a good answer. Do you
Well,
want to
thank you.
do you want to tell us any more about him? Probably
No,
not.
I
No.
absolutely not.
No, I don't think
No.
so.
That's right. Even if you got it right, you wouldn't see a single tell.
All right. All right. No, good. All right. Well, in the sacred order of equilibrium, every
Yes.
person has their place in balancing the great scale. Talk about universal energy and balance.
So
Your own
the
thoughts.
the Sacred Order was well, first off, when I was building this world, I realized like, okay, well, if I'm going to build this world, I need to build every aspect of it. Um, and so that came down to, not just the characters, but the factions involved, the government structure, the social structure.
The
What are the
religion.
main
Yeah.
exports of that planet?
Yeah.
Religion is a mainstay in our society today, whether we as an individual ascribe to it or not. Why wouldn't it be in the future? It would,
Hmm.
even if it was not familiar in terms of what we
Yeah.
consider religion,
Yeah.
what form would it take? And so at one point during the world building process, I found myself building a religion. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
um, I and I just want to say this now. No one is to turn my content into a religion after I die.
Yeah.
I want to put that out there, keep it on the airwaves. That's mine. It's not for you to abuse. Um, and I think and here's the thing, like I grew up Catholic. Um, I, I'm not. I go to church on Christmas. I'm not a particularly religious person, but I see the benefit of it, and I see the effects that it can have on society in terms of societal structure and in terms of, especially when you talk about having something to hold higher than, say, a government, which when you remove religion entirely, well, then at some point the government becomes a religion. And that's just as dangerous, if not more, without the balance there. And so I guess, whether you ascribe to a religion or not, I wanted to utilize the sacred order as a way to inject and talk about a lot of the important philosophical themes that were kind of permeating throughout the book, and will continue to permeate throughout the book because as of 2701, when the story is taking place, that is kind of the predominant religion among the planets, although it is not the only one. Um, and
It's
you'll
the
come
the
across that
four
in later books.
the four
The primes,
the four primes. Yeah.
yes. So yeah, as far as it's more of it's philosophy based,
Mm.
and just like religion today, there is a lot of good philosophy and viewpoints that can come from it or form it, but being run by humans, it just makes it's an entity that can become just as corrupted as any other because we ourselves are infallible. And so it's a philosophy that is run like a religion. That's essentially what the sacred order of equilibrium is.
Yeah.
And it's basically the idea that the universe is operating on a scale that we cannot fathom, which is not unlike a lot of religions. I also had to do a lot of religious uh, research
Research.
for
Yeah.
these portions of the book, and thankfully I had a little bit of a grounding. Like I went to a Catholic high school, and so I took 4 years of theology and learned a lot of this stuff. And thankfully, the teaching. I had a really good theology teacher when I was a freshman sophomore. He was a very down to earth guy. Um, and he basically, his big take home for anything that we ever went through was look for the religious truths between the lines of the text. What is
Hmm.
this passage trying to tell you? Or what is this? And that was one of the things that, out of anything else on this planet, Mr. Gambardella, thank you. He has since passed. He was the man. Um, he That was what stuck with me, and I was like, all right, well, that is a foundation that I can kind of get behind. Like, what are we? We're all searching for meaning. Where are we to find it? Well, with what we have in front of us, right? With whatever circumstances that we find ourselves in.
Mhm.
Whatever body we've been placed into, it kind of delegates whatever the set of lessons that we've basically been that have been given to us for our lifetime that we have to learn over the course of our lives.
Yeah.
And that is kind of where the sacred order comes in, because the sacred order believes that the universe is constantly achieving equilibrium, but equilibrium is not a straight line. Equilibrium is like
Yeah.
the symbol for the sacred order, a
Right.
pendulum that is
Yeah.
constantly swinging, ping-ponging back and forth between that straight line of perfect equilibrium. And when the universe needs to, it corrects itself. And
Mhm.
so that also becomes kind of the crux for which Roman rediscovers his purpose in life and starts off on this kind of epic spacefaring odyssey, um, that ultimately ends up
Maybe don't say.
For
Do you want to say
no,
ultimately ends up?
look, it's not really giving it away. I mean, you're watching the unfolding of a future mythological hero.
Yeah,
Mythology was always something that I was fascinated by when
loved
I was a
it.
kid.
Yeah.
Um, but I wanted to tell the story of, uh, I didn't want to show the songs that were sung afterward, right? Of grandeur and glory. I wanted to show the gritty truth of the events as they are happening. And so history is bloody.
It sure
It can
is.
be coded in glory and all of
Still.
these things, but still, despite it fascinating, but
Yeah.
it can be ugly at times. And I wanted to show kind of the ugly truth of the events as they were occurring. So
Mhm.
you're basically watching the man who ultimately becomes the most important man in future history, from his gritty beginnings to whatever the ultimate end may be, which I know you don't, but
I don't. I can only guess. You
yeah,
so kind of near the end, you end up with the unlikely allies, I would call them, Roman and Braxton, and that whole relationship is fascinating. And again, it's kind of near the end, and I'm like, oh my goodness. Well, this is obviously going to go into Braxton. We're obviously going to see their relationship more in coming books. So back to the prologue at the beginning. The other who was saying these things says humanity is still a species that requires purpose through struggle. I love that. And in the end, again, there's the other speaking, saying something, and it left me with a feeling that I've had for decades that we as a species are not evolving very quickly. What is your thought on that? Our evolution as humans?
that's a good question. Um, I wonder if evolution happens in massive spurts. It's funny. The what they teach us in school as far as evolution and the kind of steady progression of, ape to, what Homo erectus to, Homo sapien to it's it's not quite a complete answer.
Right.
If you listen, I've listened to a lot of like actual evolutionary biologists speak about this. It's not a full answer. Um, I think evolution happens in spurts, and I think there's something typically that ignites that spurt. And whether that's, you know, there's whether that's some type of cataclysmic event, whether that's some type of intervention on our behalf, or I mean, who knows, on something by something else. Um, I don't think we know all the answers yet. I'm not saying I'm like I don't like disbelieve evolution. I'm not like but I think to believe that we have all the answers would be hubris.
Oh, yes. I mean, we totally don't have all the answers. I mean, think of the things that we know. I mean, we only know them through our senses, and our senses are so limited. And, I mean, when did they first find germs, right? Until you had the
Recent.
yeah. So I, I'm with you. There's so much we don't know. Um, I don't know that we learn from our past quickly enough. If you think of war, right? Why can't people just be happy with what they have? Uh,
I think it's something in our nature. I think there's something in our nature that drives us to.
To fight, to want
progress
more. Yeah.
in any way possible. I think it's why we want the newest and the best. And I think it's related to some of our biological drives. And I think it's related to, a societal structure that promotes that. And I think it's related to, it's never one thing.
Right.
And
It
that
was, yeah.
and that's certainly, if you read the book, you'll realize that all of the events that are happening coincide into a certain outcome, but it's never one thing that gets you there. And that's actually, so that's a um, there's one thing I took from my time in physical therapy school, that was it. It's never one thing that leads to an injury.
Mm,
It's you know, maybe, let's say you injured your left hamstring. Well, maybe it's because your right hamstring was extra tight, and so at some point you were favoring your left. And so the extra stress that was put on your left actually ended up in you injuring your left over your right, which was overburdened to begin with. And so it's multiple things that end up, kind of coinciding into one injury.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
So we're basically animals and we still have those animals' instincts, but knowing that, shouldn't we be able to overcome them? And
I know. Well,
I'm
well,
asking
think
you,
about,
I'm asking you
I mean,
to have the
I
answer
mean,
for this.
but here's the thing. So like if you look at like the scope of humanity in terms of our species history, not
Mm,
just our written history,
no.
you know, for a very, very, very long time, life was relatively unchanging, at least the external life around us. Um, or the way, I should say, the way of life was relatively similar. And then, we had the Industrial Revolution, and then from then on out, the how quickly the world has changed around us,
Yeah.
just from generation to generation,
Mhm.
has superseded the types of technological leaps that took thousands of years
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
other to, and so you have to think about, there's a theory out there that says that memory is actually ingrained in our DNA in some way.
I like that.
And there, just by the way that we act in terms of our unchanging biological imperatives, um, I feel like that's something that could be very plausible, because that's not going to change overnight, despite how fast the world is changing around us from what we create. Um, yeah, so in terms of us not evolving fast enough, I think the world is evolving faster around us than we had anticipated. And well, maybe not than we anticipated, but then I just don't think it's something that we've ever really been taught. Like our attention really hasn't been brought to it. Um, and you'll find, I feel like from generation to generation, there's a lot of a bit of a lack of understanding as to, you know, what the next generation goes through. And this is myself included for, say, my daughter. It's different. She's born into a different world than I was born into. I was born in
Yes.
1990.
Yeah.
1990, I was listening to a cassette tape
Yeah.
on a Walkman.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, that wasn't until later on, but still, I remember having a CD player. I remember a time before the internet. I remember a time where, I'd come home after school, I'd throw my backpack on the, inside the front foyer, and then I'd run back out into the neighborhood and go and find my friends, and we'd ride our bikes around until the
Till
sun went
dark.
down.
Yeah.
And then I was
Yeah.
supposed to be home by the time the sun went down.
Yeah.
That was the rule.
Right.
And I broke that rule often.
Yeah.
but uh, but like it's just a very very
Different.
different
Yeah.
time,
Hmm.
and so that is, and then even just the change that's occurred in my generation's lifetime from that kind of, you know that upbringing to, where we are now. It's just a very different world,
Yeah.
economically, from a societal standpoint. in so many ways. Technologically,
do you have
yeah,
hope? Do you have hope for us as a species?
yeah, yeah. I
Roman's
mean, if I did,
Roman's gonna fix us all.
if I didn't have hope, well, Roman doesn't do anything alone, and that's what he has to realize. That's the one thing he certainly needs to begin
Yeah,
remembering. And you start to see that toward the end of the book.
yeah,
You know, even when he's forced into kind of like teamwork positions, um, he kind of ends up realizing that it's for the benefit,
yeah,
and he's kind of reintroduced to that leadership spark that had started when he was in the Ion Street Home for Boys.
yeah,
And yeah, but
yeah.
yeah, I have hope. If I didn't have any hope, I wouldn't have written the book.
Good. I am glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I commend you so much for your passion for learning. And I think today, if you're not learning something, what are you doing? There's so much you could learn, and it's so easy to learn different things, and it helps your brain, and it hopefully helps us evolve as a species. I normally ask authors what advice they would give, and I heard some of your advice from a previous interview where you talked about everything being fixable, right? Like maybe there's an error in here, maybe there was something you forgot to do. Everything's fixable, right? So don't dwell on mistakes or search for perfection. Anything else anything I didn't ask that you wish I had asked?
No, I think you did. I think you asked a ton of questions, a lot
I
of great
did.
questions, and I appreciate you reading the book prior. I really hope you enjoyed it.
I really
Um,
did. Otherwise, I would have said, no, I don't think I'll interview Nicholas Keating
oh,
Casbarro.
well,
Yeah, but I
awesome.
did read it and I did enjoy it and I wanted to. I knew that this was going to be awesome, an awesome visit. So, Nick, where can people find you?
So basically all over.
All over.
My website is vitalariumseries.com, and you can get the books, the comic books, and the limited edition stuff on the website. It's also for those who want just ease of delivery. It's on Amazon. Everyone, the audiobook, if you like audiobooks more than books, physical books, the audiobook is on Amazon and Audible. Um, and then you can find me on social media at Vitalarium Series, everywhere except X, which is just at Vitalarium because it
Okay.
was too many characters.
All right. Alrighty, and I will have links below to all of this. And people, give us a thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel because I'm always bringing you fascinating people. And Nick, you have what, six more books to write, and how many more things and screenplays to get written, and this to get up on the big screen somewhere. And you need to get back to work.
I got my work cut out for me.
You got
That's
your work
right.
cut out for you. And I
I'm
think
almost done with book two.
all right, and I think
That should
I
be
think
out. Uh, I'm shooting for uh, end of Q1 next year.
wow, and it will it be another almost 600 page book?
Might be slightly longer.
Oh, wow. Fabulous. Everyone, the author, Nicholas Keating Casbarro, the book, Vitalarium, Descent into the Void. Get it, get hooked. And thanks for visiting. Thank you for spending this time with me, Nick. And if you're ever out in Colorado, look me up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Laurel. I had a lot
You're
of fun.
welcome. I did too. Thank you. Take care. And happy holidays.
Same to you.